Welcome back to Klepper's Corner. Today in history. Today we're diving into February 2nd, a date that is apparently history's favorite storage closet. You open it up and everything falls out at once. Empires, dictators, sled dogs, punk rockers, groundhogs predicting the weather like they're meteorologists with fur. It's all here. February 2nd isn't a day. It's a cross-section of everything humanity has ever tried, failed, or accidentally done while looking confused. So let's jump in before the groundhog sees its shadow and we're stuck doing this episode for 6 more weeks. Segment 1, Forge of Empires and the great boundary-making ambition of humanity. Let's start with Otto I, crowned Holy Roman Emperor on February 2nd, 962. The day medieval Europe basically said, okay, fine, Germany can try running the universe again. It's Candlemas, a holy feast, and Otto's like, perfect time to grab a crown and casually restructure Western civilization. Otto wasn't just crowned. He negotiated a deal with the Pope, imagine a medieval prenup, called the Privilegium Ottonianum. It basically said, yes, Pope, you get land, but also I get to approve the next Pope, which is a level of HR oversight the Catholic Church has not seen since. And sure, Otto revived the idea of a universal Christian empire, but he also accidentally invented an 8-century-long argument called the Holy Roman Empire. Voltaire would later describe it as neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire, which is the academic version of your group project sucks. Then we jump continents to February 2nd, 1536, when Pedro de Mendoza founded Buenos Aires, or as it was known then, that place we try once, fail miserably at, and then come back later with a better plan. Mendoza arrives with over 1,000 men, 14 ships, and 0 respect for the people already living there. The Querandí greet them warmly, and then quickly decide, actually no, we don't like you, which is history's earliest Yelp review. The settlers end up starving, eating shoe leather, and allegedly a few mutineers, which is a diet Gwyneth Paltrow hasn't recommended only because she hasn't discovered it yet. Mendoza's Buenos Aires collapses, but like any good failed startup, it gets relaunched in 1580 under new management. And that version finally sticks. Fast forward to 1653, where New Amsterdam, today's New York City, becomes an official city. Before this, it was basically a corporate office run by the Dutch West India Company. Imagine Times Square, except instead of mascots and tourists, it's run entirely by accountants. The residents begged for a municipal government because even in the 17th century, New Yorkers demanded the right to complain officially. Peter Stuyvesant reluctantly agrees, gives the settlement a charter, and just like that, Manhattan goes from corporate colony to civic hotbed of lawsuits, trade, and real estate schemes. In other words, New York becomes New York. And then, February 2nd, 1848, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, also known as the United States swipes right on half of Mexico. The war ends. Mexico loses 55% of its territory, and the U.S. gets California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of several other states, plus the eternal right to make movies about cowboys. America pays $15 million for the land, which is a bargain, unless you factor in the part where it leads directly to the Civil War. It's the geopolitical equivalent of buying a cheap house that comes with a nest of raccoons already plotting your downfall. So there you go. February 2nd, a day when humanity keeps drawing maps, redrawing maps, or burning the map entirely and saying, let's try this again. Segment 2, the crucible of war, disaster, and, oh God, not this again. On February 2nd, 1943, the Battle of Stalingrad finally ends. Hitler insisted his troops stay there to the last man, which is a classic dictator promise. Inspiring for 5 seconds, deadly for 6 months. Field Marshal Paulus surrenders the southern pocket, but General Strecker hangs on another 2 days, radioing a final message so dramatic it sounds like it was written by Shakespeare on a deadline. 91,000 Germans surrender. Only 5,000 to 6,000 ever make it home. Stalingrad becomes the turning point of World War II, the moment when Nazi Germany goes from unstoppable machine to guy at a party who just threw up in a plant and wants to pretend he's fine. But February 2nd also gives us the Battle of Mortimer's Cross in 1461, the only historical battle that starts with fighters looking up and saying, "Why are there three suns?" A meteorological illusion called a parhelion appears, and the soldiers panic. Young Edward of York, future Edward IV, immediately rebrands it as divine endorsement. Three suns? Holy Trinity! Boom! Instant morale boost. This is basically the Middle Ages version of a political spin room. The Yorkists win, Edward claims destiny, and Owen Tudor is executed. A bad day for Lancaster, but a great day for weather used as military propaganda. Then, in 1971, Idi Amin declares himself president of Uganda. The kind of headline that historians now read and think, oh, this is where things go downhill. Amin promises order, elections, stability, the usual dictator starter pack, and then immediately purges opponents, collapses the economy, and presides over 8 years of chaos and mass violence. Western powers initially cheer him on because, of course they do. But by February 2nd, Amin has already set the tone. No constitution, no parliament, but yes, plenty of fear. And finally, you have February 2nd, 1989, when the Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan is effectively underway. The official last soldier leaves on February 15th, but by the 2nd, the occupation is done in all but paperwork. It's the end of the Brezhnev Doctrine, the unraveling of the Soviet Empire, and a long preview of the geopolitical chaos still unfolding decades later. February 2nd, the date where armies lose, dictators rise, and nobody reads the instructions before invading a country. Segment 3, rights, labor, and the eternal struggle to get people to stop being terrible to each other. On February 2nd, 1990, South African President F.W. de Klerk stands up in Parliament and basically detonates apartheid with words. He unbans the ANC, legalizes political parties long treated as enemies, and announces the release of Nelson Mandela. The chamber gasps. Actual, audible gasps. Because nothing says historic moment like a room full of politicians realizing they must now pretend they supported this all along. And 2 weeks later, Mandela walks free. February 2nd becomes the day South Africa turns the page, even if the rest of the book still needs editing. In the United States, February 2nd has also been a day of fighting discrimination, slowly, awkwardly, and usually only after being sued aggressively. In 1959, Arlington and Norfolk, Virginia desegregate their schools peacefully, which is the 1950s equivalent of hearing a bear politely ask someone to pass the salt. It's a victory against massive resistance, a strategy that was basically, what if we just don't follow the Supreme Court's ruling and pretend that's allowed? The 23rd Amendment gets Senate approval on this date in 1960, aiming to end the poll tax, because apparently democracy needed DLC content before everyone could use it. Then in 1987, the longest steel strike in U.S. history ends. It's a defining moment for American labor, the point where industrial unions begin fading and corporations realize they can outsource jobs faster than you can say your factory is now in Malaysia. And on a lighter cultural note, February 2nd, 1876 gives us Major League Baseball. Not baseball itself, but the actual league structure. So if you've ever watched a baseball game and thought, this could really use a few more rules and way more arguments about statistics, you can thank February 2nd. Segment 4, culture, literature, punk rock, and the many ways artists explode on contact with society. James Joyce receives the first copies of Ulysses on February 2nd, 1922, his birthday, proving once and for all that the best gift you can give yourself is a book so complicated that most readers pretend they've read it. Ulysses revolutionizes literature, inspires decades of scholarship, and becomes illegal in the U.S. because the government decides that the human mind is ready for World War I, but not internal monologues about masturbation. But February 2nd is also the day punk rock loses its most chaotic son. Sid Vicious dies of a heroin overdose in 1979. The punk movement's tragic mic drop. Sid becomes the forever symbol of raw rebellion. Half music, half self-destruction, all unfortunate choices. His legacy is complicated, tragic, and a reminder that being iconic is not the same thing as being okay. And February 2nd gives us several major thinkers: Solomon Guggenheim, Ayn Rand, and the death of Bertrand Russell. It's like the universe decided this day will cover the entire ideological spectrum: socialism, objectivism, analytic philosophy, and one of the best museums to ever confuse tourists. Then in 2014, we lose Philip Seymour Hoffman, one of the greatest actors of his generation. A reminder that talent does not make you invincible, and that addiction is a villain even history struggles to defeat. Segment 5, science, tradition, nature, and that one rodent with a meteorology degree. On February 2nd, 1852, London unveils the first public flushing toilet, an invention that does more for civilization than half of Europe's kings combined. Victorian London finally realizes that maybe the streets shouldn't smell like fermented death, and suddenly sanitation becomes a science instead of a suggestion. Then in 1925, heroic sled dogs save Nome, Alaska from a diphtheria outbreak. Gunnar Kaysen and Balto complete the final run, even though Togo did most of the distance. Balto gets the statue because history, like Hollywood, rewards whoever crosses the finish line with good lighting. Then in 1971, the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands is signed. It's the world saying wetlands matter, even though most people still think a wetland is just a swamp that's trying its best. February 2nd is also Groundhog Day, because Americans looked at Candlemas, a beautiful Christian tradition, and said, what if a furry animal predicted the weather and we all pretended it wasn't weird? Punxsutawney Phil emerges, spots his shadow, and we collectively agree that winter has opinions. And finally, Pope John Paul II turns February 2nd into the World Day of Consecrated Life, because nothing says holy devotion like sharing your feast day with a rodent meteorologist. In conclusion, February 2nd is not just a date. It's a multiverse of human behavior. Empires rise, armies fall, toilets flush, dogs race across frozen tundra, dictators declare themselves king of everything, and a groundhog becomes the closest thing America has to an oracle. It's a day where literature changes forever. Music implodes spectacularly. Treaties redraw continents, and entire systems of injustice begin to crumble. February 2nd is the reminder that history doesn't spread itself out evenly. Sometimes it piles everything onto one square of the calendar like it's overpacking a suitcase. And lucky for us, that suitcase popped open today. Thank you for joining me, and we'll see you next time on Klepper's Corner Today in History.